Hey guys, I'm the Comics Kid 2099, and I am here to review a graphic novel that I read last week. It's this week for me, but by the time you see this video, it's last week for you. Wisdom, Rudiments of Wisdom. This is a very interesting book. I did not know what to expect from this. First of all, it's written by Paul Cornell, who has had a past in writing the Doctor Who television series. I am almost certain I've never seen anything that he's written in Doctor Who. And also, at Marvel, after this miniseries, he wrote Captain Britain and MI-13, which is sort of a sequel to this. This kind of introduces MI-13 as far as I know, unless they appeared before this in some comic I've never read. MI-13 first appeared here, and then later, Paul Cornell was using that branch of the British Secret Intelligence that he created in the Captain Britain series that he was writing. And if I had to describe this book in one sentence, I would say this is Warren Ellis's The Authority set in the Marvel Universe. If you've ever read Warren Ellis's The Authority, it was sort of a spin-off of Stormwatch, which was a Image Comics title. I think it was under Jim Lee's branch of Image Comics. Stormwatch was basically just I think they were British superheroes. I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure they were all located in Great Britain, or they may have been working for the United Nations, and so they were kind of from all over the place. And then that series lasted for about, I don't know, 50 issues, and then Warren Ellis came on board, and he worked on it for a little while, probably about 2 years, and then basically he killed all of the characters, brought in a whole bunch of new characters, and rebooted the title as The Authority. It didn't reboot, but The Authority was a sequel to Stormwatch. And The Authority, under Warren Ellis's hand, was basically a very irreverent look at superheroes, but also in a way, it was a very realistic look at superheroes. And I've said before, I really hate real-worlding fantastical ideas. Like, if you have a world where characters can fly at Mach speed or whatever, then why are you trying to inject realism into that story? This is one of those things where the concepts are not dumbed down by realism, so you're not having characters whose powers are decreased in the name of realism, but this was a series that looks at how would superheroes really act in the real world. And it was, like I said, very irreverent, not only towards all of the characters in the story were very irreverent toward each other and toward the rest of the world, but it was a very irreverent look at superheroes, but also very interesting. And I think maybe in talking about this, I need to go back and read that stuff, because it's been several years since I read any of The Authority. This is basically The Authority meets the Marvel Universe, in the sense that it's a British superhero team working for the British government, and they are a branch called MI-13. And throughout this, there's several mentions of MI-5 and MI-6. As far as I know, those branches actually exist. I'm pretty sure they both do. And there's one character who appeared in the Excalibur comics in the 1980s, Alistair Stewart, who was, if I'm not mistaken, kind of a parody of a character from Doctor Who in the 1970s or 1980s. And Alistair Stewart worked for one of the MI5 or MI6 branches. And in this, he's portrayed as being like a 70-year-old man. In the Excalibur comics, he was like in his early 30s or late 20s. So that was really weird. And I read somewhere last night, whenever I saw that that was supposed to be Alistair Stewart, I read last night that Paul Cornell, that was not his idea, and that was Trevor Hairsine's idea, to just make him an old man. And I guess Hairsine did not know that Alistair Stewart was supposed to be about the same age as Peter Wisdom. As far as the concept, it's a 6-issue miniseries, and in the same way that The Authority was very irreverent, this is as well. All these characters, they're not friends with each other, and they're not buddies. They work together because they have to. A word that's thrown around a lot in this book is duty. You can laugh now if you're an immature 6-year-old. Duty, like what's-his-face, Peter Wisdom, has a sense of duty. He does what he does out of duty, and even if it's stuff that he doesn't want to do. There's one thing he has to do in this book. He absolutely doesn't want to do it, but to save the rest of the world, he does it. He does it because he has to. And honestly, Peter Wisdom was a character I never really cared about him. He was basically a ripoff of John Constantine from DC Comics, except he was a mutant and he worked with Excalibur a little bit. Speaking of Warren Ellis, I believe Warren Ellis created Peter Wisdom. As far as the premise of the book, each issue is mostly a standalone issue, but there is a loose interconnecting storyline, and I'm not going to talk too much about the storyline because I do think you guys should read this. If you were a big fan of The Authority in the early 2000s under the hands of either Warren Ellis or I would even say Mark Millar, if you were a fan of The Authority under those two guys, you would definitely like this book. And if you're a fan of Captain Britain and MI-13, which I have not read, I'm assuming you would like this because it's dealing with some of the same characters. I believe John the Skrull from MI-13 and the Captain Britain series, I believe he is in that series and he's in this series. He's introduced here. But this has got a lot of really interesting stuff. Shang-Chi shows up for 2 issues. There's a connection to a character that I'm a huge fan of. I don't know if I've ever talked about this character on my channel. I have once. There's a connection to a character that I'm a huge fan of, but I'm not going to talk about who that is because that would be a pretty big spoiler for the last half of the book. Really, it's a pretty enjoyable book. Now, there is one thing that happens. Some of the guys, they're not really bad guys, but they're kind of morally gray. They do something that kind of kicks off the ending of this book, and when you read it, you're thinking, why didn't they just do this other thing? It would have been a lot easier, and it just would have been easier on everybody. And it's one of those things, I don't want to talk about it because that would be a spoiler, but it's not a perfect book. The plot, I don't want to say it's a plot hole, but it's one of those things where you, at the end of the day, when you're done reading it, you're wondering, why didn't these characters just do that? It's a character plot hole, I guess. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I kind of wish there was more stuff like this. I'm more interested in reading Captain Britain and MI-13 now that I've read this, because if it's anything like this, I am going to thoroughly enjoy that book. And I've heard a lot of people say that that was a really interesting series, so I'm very looking forward to reading that now. But like I said, if you were a fan of The Authority in the early 2000s, I didn't read past Mark Millar, so I don't know if you were a fan of that. I don't know if you would like this, but I do think this is very similar to The Authority from the early 2000s. And that's all I have to say. I hope that this review was helpful for you guys. I hope that I was able to help you find out if you wanted to read this book or not. And I hope that if you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back later in the week with some other kind of video. Not sure exactly when. So I will see you guys sometime later. Have a great day.